Hey, what's up? It's Animal here. Just wanted to catch up with my channel that no one watches. It's fine. You know, I get out of this what I put into it, and right now I'm putting into it not a lot, but it's still fun. And I have a bunch of things to catch my non-viewers up on. One, you get what you sign up for. This is a thought that came out of a conversation with a friend of mine who enrolled himself into a couples counseling weekend retreat this weekend and has been having a difficult time with it. And it's kind of funny because he's a guy I've been friends with for a long time. And I won't reveal anything too personal about him, but he's basically caught in a situation where he's known for many years that his relationship is essentially over as a primary romantic relationship, and yet has stayed in it for the variety of reasons that people stay in codependent situations. And when we talk about these situations a lot, what's become clear to me is how much codependence is. It operates just like another addiction. So like, it's a behavior or a suite of behaviors that you continue to do even though you know it's having a destructive aspect on your life. So similar to the way you might feel about smoking cigarettes or something like that, where you know that this behavior is bad for you and hurting you, and yet you continue to do it anyway. So you get what you sign up for. That's something I'm thinking about. And today I've signed up for to get myself to do at least 6 mile run. So I'm working on that. I'm gonna go do that after this video. Took a little nap, did a bunch of other stuff, recorded some other video content for another project, a consulting project of mine. Let's see, what else do I want to talk about? Oh, had just a beautiful Friday night with a woman that I've basically been wild about for 8 months, and hopefully, I don't know, I'm cautiously optimistic about that, but I'm also a realist, and it might just trying to stay in the moment, you know what I mean? Not trying to not look too far into the future, trying to enjoy it in the moment. What else? Okay, Obscenity Press, my other project, my writing project that I want to turn into kind of an online culture and arts magazine called Obscenity Press, is still moving forward. There's been some long delays between posts because the posts are primarily these long form essays, philosophical essays that I'm writing, and there's really no way for me to do them faster. I have to negotiate time and energy and space for writing really high quality content there. Unlike this channel where I'm just kind of like having fun with it, doing whatever I want, Obscenity Press, I'm trying to set a high caliber for both production value and for the level of discourse there. Whereas, with my Animal Tagger YouTube, I'm just trying to have a great time, trying to put myself out there, get comfortable on camera, say some cool stuff, make some friends, build community, whatever. A couple other things that have come up. So yeah, wait, Obscenity Press, what else did I want to say? Oh yeah, other cool stuff. I'm working on AI features for that as well. So I'm going to be experimenting with cloning my own voice so that I can have AI read my content and just have voiceover for all the essays that I'm writing. So I'm working on that. And I'm also working on experimenting with some tools for creating AI-driven videos, and again, only as supporting. The content is primarily really written content, and so I'm just trying to find other avenues for how to get it out there better within the kind of like limited amount of time that I have to spend on that. Two other things that I wanted to talk about today. Came out of discussions with friends recently, and one of them is that there are two phrases that are extremely powerful but are often overlooked, and are often things that we think of as being the opposite of powerful. We think of them as being weak. But two of the most powerful phrases that you can learn to lean on to become a more powerful person, that are very counterintuitive, are the idea that the two phrases are, one is "I don't know," and the other is "I need help." So it's very simple, like three words in each case. I need help and I don't know. Powerful people who are truly embodying their most powerful selves, learn that these phrases are instrumental to their success. So when you actually do feel weak and you feel vulnerable and you feel potentially threatened by your environment and by the world around you, what people often do is they won't use these phrases even when they would be most useful to them. So I was in a relationship previously where the woman that I was in a relationship with would go to great lengths to explain, instead of simply saying "I need help," those three words, she would go to great lengths to build a picture of the world or a picture of the situation in which the result of the long form discussion that she would have with you would be a situation where you had to help her. And she would go to such great lengths to avoid feeling insecure, to avoid feeling at someone else's mercy, in the sense of, when you ask for help, you're basically, what you face as a potential situation where you've admitted that you need something from someone else, and that opens you up to having to potentially feel rejection or to feel the full weight of that actual insecurity or the actual need that you have in your life. Well, a much more powerful way to be is to just skip all of that and to say, to embrace the reality of your situation, and to learn to use those kinds of phrases to your advantage. So, another situation where this came up recently was in a conversation with a friend of mine who was afraid to appear incompetent at work in terms of the way her boss saw her. She wanted to prove to her boss that she was a capable woman who was worth her high salary and worth her salt in her career and her position at the company. And so she was afraid to admit that she didn't really understand something or didn't really know what was going on. And so in our conversation together, I tried to help her understand that to be powerful in that role, the most powerful thing that she could do is actually to admit boldly that she doesn't know, or that she needs more time, or that she needs clarification on something, or that she needs something to be explained to her in a different way because there was something missing. Learning how to ask for what you need and learning how to admit what you don't know, that is the missing ingredient for a lot of people that actually would make them the best possible employee, the best possible partner, the best possible collaborator, right? So if I'm on the other side of that exchange and I can trust that whoever I'm working with if I can trust you to say what is really happening for you, and not to sugarcoat it, or not to try to like pretend that you know things you don't know, or to pretend that you understand things that you don't understand, or to pretend that you have competence that you don't have. Well, that actually creates a very unsafe and unreliable partnership and unsafe collaboration in a lot of ways. When I want someone to, when I want somebody to be dependable and to be a creative ally, I need them to be able to articulate those things to me. I need help. I don't know. So like learning to embrace those things as actually fundamental to being a powerful man or woman in the workforce, or in your creative life, or in your romantic life. Like that's true power. True power embraces that. So that's one thing. Another thing another thing is that and this is a lesson that I learned for myself recently. It wasn't something that came out of conversation with others, but it's something that finally became so clear to me. And that is that if you want to be here now, you have to give everything up. If you want to be here now, you have to give everything else up, let's say. Maybe that's a better way to say it. The trick about being present and being truly committed to the present moment and the present condition of your life is that all of the projections that you have into the future and from the past need to be cleansed. You need to sever those things. This is often at odds with other things that we have going on. So like all of us have an aspirational self. We have a self of like a vision of ourselves that is actually different from who we actually are. It is who we wish we were, who we wish we were going to become, perhaps. So it can, sometimes it's specifically projected into the future, like when you're on a weight loss journey or something like that. Like, I'm going to lose 60 pounds. Well, you've projected into the future this idea of yourself with having lost that weight, or you've potentially projected into the future the idea of yourself getting a promotion at work or changing careers. So these are aspects of our aspirational selves. And there's a useful side to that, which is the side of manifestation, right? So like when you want to, if you want to create something in your life, it's really useful to have a goal, like that you've figured out, that you've established, and that you're moving towards in measurable ways. So we need that. However, what happens is that we start to believe that, so there's two things. One is that sometimes it's our aspirational self in terms of our goals that creates a kind of a wishing or a desire for that. The desire becomes so strong that I had to pause for a second because I wanted to think about and write down a couple things instead of just rambling. But basically the two things I'm trying to capture here are that our aspirational selves, in terms of who we're planning to be in the future, can sometimes be emotionally laden in a way that prevents us from being authentically ourselves in the moment, in the present moment. And I'll come back to that in a moment. But the second piece of it is that sometimes who we think we are already, so it's not like our aspiration, but how we view ourselves in the present moment is often not real. Like there's aspects to it that are fantastical, and yet we've internalized them as though they are real. So we tell ourselves, but essentially another way to say that is that we paint a more flattering picture of ourselves than the person that we actually are. And I think that fundamentally this is almost always true. And it has to do with our biology. So this isn't, it isn't a dysfunction. It's actually a consequence of our biology that this occurs. But when you start to see it in yourself, there is also more power available to you and more truth available to you in terms of understanding who and what you are. So to look at the second idea first, that we in actuality are not necessarily the person that we think we are. This might be, to play out a simple version of this, it might be that we consider ourselves to be a good person, for example. And so if we have that view of ourselves, we basically are telling ourselves like we are morally, on the up and up, and that we kind of discount or diminutize the ways in which we screw up, or that we are an immoral person. So we kind of have a tendency to discount our own failings as being these kind of minor, like once in a while mistakes that we make, when the overall picture is us as a good person. Whereas we might not be as charitable in our view of others. So that's just one example. The other piece that we were talking about previously, where we're trying to manifest something in the future. And there's a lot of talk on the internet about this idea of manifesting, and the idea of, what is it? What's a stupid thing called? The Secret. What is it? What is that? Law of attraction. That's what I'm looking for. Law of attraction stuff. So there's a piece of the law of attraction that's correct, which is if you have a positive mindset and you're a positive person, and you have an optimistic view, you're going to take different actions and you're going to create different realities that then other people can play into. So there's something very real about that, and that's very useful. However, there's another piece of it that is completely false, which is the idea that you can just sort of imagine something and then call it into your life. So I'm just going to imagine the perfect partner for myself and they're going to appear. Well, there's a lot of realities in which that might not happen, and we could all think of something similar to that. Maybe I have been injured in a car accident and I can no longer walk. Well, no amount of manifestation is going to necessarily repair damage to my spinal column, for example. There's plenty of examples like that we could come up with. So it's important to be able to tease those things apart and look at there's parts of it that are true and there's parts of it that are completely false. So to bring these concepts back to the discussion today, which is that if you want to really be here in the present moment, you have to give everything else up. What I mean by that is this idea, so it's learning to let go of this view of who you think you are and who you want to be. If you can divorce yourself from that and just basically give up on those dreams, those feelings, those those projections of yourself, those intellectualized frameworks of who we think we are. If we can let go of that stuff and just be who we actually are, that's the only way we can actually get into that true piece of accepting the actual moment for what it is and accepting ourselves for who and what we are in the moment. It is when we stop needing to be something other than the completely fallible and not always moral and not always kind and all the positive things that we wish to see ourselves as. When we start to be able to really embrace the fact that we are all of those things, sure, but we're also all of these negative things and all of these dark things, and that those are just as fundamental to who and what we are as the good stuff. And the same goes for the universe. The same goes for the social world that we find ourselves in. Another way of thinking about it is, so let's say you're driving on the highway and somebody cuts you off or drives really recklessly or dangerously. Now, the part of you that there's part of you that wants to believe that that person could have been some other way in that moment. You say, why is that person driving like a maniac and endangering me? But the reality is that that's the situation that transpired. That only ever transpired in that one way where that person cuts you off. That's the reality of the universe, actually. It's the reality of that specific instant, but that's also the reality of the larger web of the universe, is that there was no possibility that that person did some other behavior in that moment. That was the only way that that ever transpired, as we can see from the experience that we went through. And so if you can get to this point of letting go of the fantasy that that person should have operated their motor vehicle in some other more safe way than they did in that moment, like letting go of that fantasy allows you to see reality as it is. And you don't have to judge it. That's the other piece of it. It's like, if you look at it as a situation where that person had a choice and that they failed, like they basically like disappointed you in some way by making the wrong choice, then you have to carry that burden of disappointment. That's something that you're choosing to carry. And what I'm suggesting is you don't control the other person, right? In that situation, the other person did what they did. What you do have the ability to control, though, is your reaction to it and your view of it. So like that is actually within your power. So I'm not saying that we should just accept bad behavior from people, right? We can still have rules and want for the world to be created in a more positive way, where people are not being reckless on the freeway, or where we are being better versions of ourselves, or what have you. That's fine. But given the fact that you're going to confront realities that you don't control, like being cut off in traffic, ask yourself, well, how do I want to feel when that happens? How do I want to respond to that? And if the answer is like, I want to engage in a road rage behavior, so be it. That's your choice. But for me, like mostly if I end up having some kind of road rage type reaction, that feels like a mistake. It feels like I took a situation that was bad and then I made it worse. And then internally, I also felt worse in the process. Now, it's not always that way. There are times when I've given someone the finger or something like that because they pissed me off. And I did feel better. I actually did feel better from having done that. So, there's an argument for being a jerk sometimes. And that's fine. But bringing it back to the example of our aspirational selves and being here in the moment, like, when we let go of our judgments about how the world and the universe and the particular moment that we find ourselves in, when we let go of our judgments about how those things should be, life opens up in a way that can only really be described as flow state. It's very much the kind of thing that people describe when they're lost in a creative process. So for me, but it's accessible even in the most mundane of situations. So even when you're not engaged in whatever kind of creative process or athletic performance or whatever kind of space that you're normally going to get that flow state in, what I'm suggesting is that you can embody essentially that same kind of flow state in even the most mundane situations, walking across the street, riding in an elevator, like doing anything, like having a miserable time, even being sick, having an injury, having the experience of being yelled at. It is possible, if you train the mind and train your responses, to essentially just see everything as this sort of see everything as this sort of perfect unfolding of karma, you know, where like there is no other possibility. What is happening is the only thing that could possibly happen given all of the complex factors and variability of you know, all time up until this present moment. So when you start to really embody that, life feels different and it feels good in a way. There's like a deep kind of peace and antidote to anxiety that comes out of that. And so the mental trick that I use on this, it's kind of like a mental trick. It's not, it's what I'm talking about isn't a description of truth, right? Because if we're using language, we're never capturing truth. All we can do is point at it with words. There's no set of words anywhere in existence or even symbols of any kind that can capture truth. All they can do is suggest elements of truth, right? And so don't get hung up on what is true in that sense. There is truth. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not making a solipsism argument, and I'm not making a argument that there is not an objective truth. I think there is. What I'm getting at is that no matter how precise our word choice and language gets, we will never arrive at truth. We will only ever suggest elements of truth. So going back to this idea of sort of viewing the world in a more karmically deterministic way as a tool to free oneself from unnecessary suffering and pain, the way that I do this for myself is to essentially view all interactions with others as though they were deterministic. So when somebody cuts me off in traffic, I think, oh, that's how that went, you know? That's how that had to go for that person in that situation. And I do the exact opposite for myself, where I hold myself to a higher standard and I say, everything that I do, I could potentially do better. So I think of myself as having perfect free will, or as perfect of free will as I can given my physical constraints, right? Like I don't have wings, so I can't fly or something like that. So the trick is give everyone else a blank check by saying, I understand that reality is deterministic for you and that you're doing the best that you can, and that, you know, I can free myself up from any judgment or baggage that I have around how you should be doing better, or how others should have behaved differently, or how, you know, on and on, like their political views are wrong or whatever it is. And then with myself, I do the opposite and say, you know, I can do better, and how can I, you know, encourage myself to seek out better choices. Now, you can also use the deterministic model on yourself to offer yourself some self-compassion. So you can also look at yourself in the same way that you look at others and say, you know, when you're kind of playing, you know, if you're doing a post-mortem on some failure in your past, you can use that same, you know, concept and say, okay, like given the circumstances I was in, that was the best I could do, but how can I learn from that for the future? How can I learn from those circumstances to potentially take a different action when I'm confronted with similar stimuli going forward? Anyway, I think I've rambled enough. What do you think? Does it ring true to you? Do you think I am a jackass? Because sometimes I think I am a jackass, and that's fine. The other thing I want to do is I want to try my hand at writing some stand-up comedy, because that's something that I really like, but it scares me, and I feel completely unfunny, you know, when I try to think about doing, you know, actually being somebody who gets up and tells jokes. Like, so I'm being met with deep resistance around that when I think about it. And it reminds me of Stephen Pressfield's book, The War of Art, which I need to listen to again, I think, and get myself over the hump with respect to that. Anyway, this is the end of my video because I definitely am rambling now. So, thank you for watching this far. And the other thing there was one other thing I wanted to say. I really appreciate things that are emergent, that haven't formed into a solid thing yet. And so I'm kind of actually trying to keep my channel in that place where I don't want to just be the same thing all the time. Like, oh, it's a guy who's like recording vlogs, or it's a guy who's, singing songs on YouTube, or offering wisdom, or, whatever. I actually I like things that are surprising and that are filled with different aspects and that haven't settled. I think about that with when a new, when a band starts a new music project, or when a director's first learning how to make films and they haven't quite hit their style yet. There's something so cool about the emergent qualities and the playful way in which different things are brought in, and there's not a sense of it's like you don't, it just hasn't congealed in a way that is recognizable yet. And so I'm kind of trying to keep this channel like that, and so that's on my mind too. What do you think about that? Is that annoying? I'd like to hear your thoughts. Cool. I hope you have a kick-ass rest of your day. This is Animal Taggart signing off.